The United States' involvement in Vietnam was a complex web of historical, political, and ideological factors that ultimately led to one of the most controversial wars in American history. It all began with French colonial rule in Vietnam, a country that had been under French control until World War II. After the war, the Vietnamese nationalist movement, led by Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh, sought independence from French colonial forces. This desire for independence sparked the First Indochina War from 1946 to 1954, a bloody conflict between the Viet Minh and the French that ultimately ended with the Geneva Accords in 1954. The Geneva Accords temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel, with the Viet Minh controlling the north and the French-backed state of Vietnam controlling the south. Following their defeat at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the French withdrew from Vietnam, leaving a power vacuum that the United States would soon fill. The U.S. saw Vietnam as a crucial battleground in the larger Cold War context, viewing it as a strategic location to contain the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. With the fear of the domino theory looming large, the idea that the fall of one country to communism would lead to the fall of neighboring countries, the U.S. felt compelled to support the government of South Vietnam against the communist North. As tensions escalated between North and South Vietnam, the U.S. began providing economic and military aid to the South Vietnamese government. The U.S. military presence in Vietnam increased steadily as they sought to combat the communist forces of the National Front for the Liberation of South Vietnam, NLF, or Viet Cong, and the North Vietnamese Army, NVA. The turning point came in 1964 with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where North Vietnamese forces allegedly attacked U.S. naval vessels. This incident led to the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which gave President Lyndon B. Johnson broad authorization to escalate U.S. military involvement in Vietnam. This marked the beginning of large-scale U.S. military intervention in what would become known as the Vietnam War. The U.S. found itself embroiled in a conflict that would last for years, costing thousands of American and Vietnamese lives. The war was marked by brutal fighting, guerrilla warfare, and widespread devastation. The U.S. faced fierce resistance from the Viet Cong and the NVA, who were determined to reunify Vietnam under communist rule. Despite pouring billions of dollars and countless resources into the war effort, the U.S. struggled to make significant progress in Vietnam. The conflict became increasingly unpopular at home, leading to widespread protests and anti-war movements across the country. The war divided the nation like never before, with many questioning the morality and purpose of U.S. involvement in Vietnam. In 1973, the U.S. signed the Paris Peace Accords, officially ending its military involvement in Vietnam. The war had taken a heavy toll on both countries, leaving a legacy of pain, trauma, and division that would last for generations. The fall of Saigon in 1975 marked the end of the Vietnam War, with North Vietnam emerging victorious and reunifying the country under communist rule. The U.S. involvement in Vietnam was a complex and tragic chapter in American history, shaped by a combination of historical, political, and ideological factors. It was a war that tested the limits of American power and influence, leaving scars that are still felt to this day. Vietnam remains a poignant reminder of the cost of war and the consequences of foreign intervention.